Well, it's looking good and dry in there. Welcome back to Tech Garage, presented by rockauto.com. Ready for the new carbon impregnated cabin air filter. Now, direction matters. We mentioned that we're coming from outside in, the airflow is down through, follow the arrow. It only goes in one way. And why carbon? Because that will catch and kill any active mold or mildew or bacteria that may ever want to come back in there. Won't be able to grow. I'll put this trap door back on in just a minute, but I mentioned the actuator. So here's a good test for you. I've got this panel just about down and out. There we go. Now we got access. The actuator runs that gate, the air control gate in there for heat or cold, and directs the air where it needs to go. Remember, Mrs. Gardner said it was constantly staying cold in here. Couldn't get control of that. So the test is, with the key in the accessory mode, turn your temperature range dial and you should hear and see, in this case, the actuator moving. We got nothing. Now, I tried that on the driver's side and you can hear it. You could actually hear it running over there, and there's not a temperature zone control issue on that side. So the actuator, which is right here, has a connector right here. Let me pull this out and get a good look at this. This is just a visual inspection, no broken posts. There's 6 posts down there. They all look good. So I don't think we have an electrical issue. And again, the driver's side's working properly. So I went back to the rockauto.com stock room. I got a new actuator. I'm going to go ahead and get that swapped out, get it all buttoned back up, the bottom cap, the liner, and the glove box, and we're going to be ready for a test drive. But if you want to see how this whole system really works, John's got that.
Well, what is the case duct system and how does it all work? Well, right here, we'll start with our actual graphic. You can see right here that blower motor I showed you earlier. Now, coming inside or outside the car, depending on where we want the air. If we want it to come from the outside or we want it to recirculate inside, this door is going to control that. And we blow across that evaporator. We talked about that earlier with the moisture buildup. Now we have a temperature door here. We can shift it up in this position and let that cold air condition bypass that heater core and come into the car, or we can shift the door up or down depending on what we want to do. If it's down, we're not going to have air condition on. What's going to happen here is the air is going to flow through the heater core, and that's going to put heat in the car depending on the temperature. And these are just temperature doors here that's going to determine where it's going to go, floor, up, down, no matter what it is. Now I have a few right here to show you. There's different types of temperature doors and actuators. A while back we had vacuum actuated ones. We actually started with cable ones. Now you can see right here, if I move this cable back and forth, it's actually just driving the door right there. The cable pulls and pulls the door and allows that one to move. Now after that, we kind of went to some vacuum actuated ones. They're located right here. And that's what all these hoses are. These are vacuum actuated hoses that go to it. I actually have a vacuum pump, and if you watch this door right here, I'll hook this up. And as the car would apply vacuum, if you select it inside or outside, it would actually pump here, and you can see the door open. It would hold the door open. Once I went ahead and I pulled the vacuum away from it with the actuator switch, I can show it to you right here. The door is going to close, okay? So open, close, vacuum actuated, depending on solenoids and switches. And these are all color coded. So if you have an actuator door in an old car, you can go around and check these, make sure you have vacuum that's pulling the door open. Now what we're dealing with is these new electronics. These new electronics are pretty cool because you got these different electrical solenoids. Now you have one here with an arm that's driving the door like this one, or you could have one that actually has a shaft that goes in there and drives it. Now be careful with these. A lot of times they're either timed or actuated to the door. Well, what does that mean? That means sometimes I have to plug it in and get the computer and make sure it's in the right position, or put it in at the right position, because if the door's up and the motor's down, when I go to run it, it has nowhere to go, so you can do damage to the motor. So check that out as well. Now you can see the door right here. This is pretty cool because if I reach over, watch this temperature door right here. All I have to do is just push a button. And when I push a button, it's going to go ahead and actuate that door, and there it goes. So I went ahead and pushed the recirculation button. It opens up. Now what's going on here? It's actually taking air from the outside through the cowling of the car, and it's coming in and it's using that air. Now if you got it on auto and the car's getting nice and cold, it wants to use some inside air, it's just going to switch, and you can see the door here close, and when the door closes, it closes there, and then when you put it on auto, it kicks it back 20%. It's not always fully closed. We always have a little bit of outside air. That's so when you slam the doors, you don't blow the windows out or have that sonic boom. You have a little bit of ventilation right there. So this is a real good look at the temperature doors. Now what Brian's dealing with over there, he's dealing with the temperature sensors that actually control the right side and the left side, and they're located on the side of the case. That allows the driver to have a temperature and allows the passenger to have a temperature. And we're talking about my wife, very temperature sensitive.
Critical, and it's no wonder that actuator, the door wasn't working, the actuator's stuck, you can actually hear something banging around in there.
Is it?
So that thing's shot, and it's
Yeah.
a no-brainer. Old school cable or vacuum, we may not have had a problem, but that electronic actuator is absolutely broken. So went ahead and swapped it out. I think we're good. We did a test drive, ran full heat, full air, no temperature zone issues at all. I think Mrs. Gardner's going to be happy.
And I think you saved my relationship. Now listen, when you're putting these dashes back together, there's little 7mm screws. I mean, you really have to be patient and pulling them apart. Sometimes they're up in there, they're very hard to find.
Yeah, I used a power ratchet bringing them out, but I put them all back in by hand for that very reason. Just take your time, wipe it all down, clean it up, do a professional job. We're all set.
Well, perfect. We'll get this car back to her. She's going to be happy. Thank you so much, Brian. But stick around. There's plenty more. We're bringing in Project M&M right after this break.